Hello and welcome to the Brilliant People podcast by executive search firm Assertitude. I'm your host, Linnea Jungnelius. My guest today brings both boardroom credibility and street-level sales grit. Paul Dodd is the go-to-market operating partner at Sixth Street, a $100 billion global investment firm that's reimagining how capital and capabilities come together to drive value. You've probably seen their name tied to portfolio companies like Airbnb, Spotify, and in sports with bold plays in the Celtics, Spurs, Real Madrid, Legends, and Bay FC. Sixth Street isn't a one-trick pony. They're flexible, fiercely thematic, and always finding creative ways to structure and solve. Paul leads value creation on the commercial front, working with portfolio teams to turn strategy into real growth and fast. He's been a CRO many times over. IPOs, exits, team builds, messy integrations. He's done it. And now he's part of a new wave of operating partners, the kind who skip the cookie-cutter playbooks and focus on impactful work that moves the needle. He knows what it takes because he's been there. And that's exactly what we'll dive into today. Paul, welcome. I'm thrilled to have you in the studio.
Thank you so much, and humbled to be here.
Fantastic. Let's start in a different place, not with the impressive track record we just ran through, but we'll get there. Let's talk about the moments that have shaped you. And when you think back, maybe something from growing up or early career, was there an experience or influence that's really shaped how you lead or how you show up for others today?
Boy, we're jumping right off in the deep end.
That's it.
My story starts with a very small town and very humble means, places where opportunities felt incredibly limited. Being raised by a single mother, we lived check to check, constantly aware of the lack of resources, not just financial, but really the opportunities and access to resources that allowed you to do whatever you were meant to do. That feeling of being kind of held back and not having the capacity to reach your full potential, it's a fire that still burns within me today. But even with the struggle, there was a powerful gift, my mother. She was an embodiment of love, hard work, grit, and persistence. And she faced adversity head on, never gave up, and that became my blueprint. And like many kids in similar situations, I dreamed of an escape. And plan A for me, no surprise, in a small town, professional sports. So I poured my heart and soul into sports. My stats were pro level, but unfortunately my physique didn't quite match my ambition. So let's just say I wasn't destined for the NFL. So plan B emerged, higher education. So university became my ticket to a life beyond living paycheck to paycheck. I was the first person in my family to ever have the opportunity to go to university, so I needed a plan. I knew I had an affinity for business and numbers, so I hatched a plan. It was probably naive, but it worked. I figured if I could understand the financial language of the business, I could understand the business itself. And if I understood the business, I could find ways to add value and hopefully parlay that into opportunities for success. So that led me to an accounting degree as a starting point, and I became an auditor and then a controller. That wasn't my end-all, be-all passion, so I was hungry for more. I pursued an MBA and perhaps surprisingly, a master's in psychology. That combination opened up doors in world of marketing and sales where I've spent the majority of my career, constantly learning and evolving. And my journey to reach full potential is still ongoing, but I'm on the field playing the game.
That's an amazing story, Paul. And that internal fire that you talked about, it's no surprise you're in the commercial side of the business today and that you've spent the majority of your career building and scaling these go-to-market teams. And you've done it, through all these pivot points and complexity and pressure. I'm curious, as you reflect back on that, but also think a bit more about it, what drew you to the commercial side of business in the first place?
Well, it's kind of full circle. As I mentioned, the dream of playing professional sports. While I'm not on the field, I found something that captures really the same energy and competitive spirit, which is go-to-market. And for me, go-to-market is the closest thing to sports in the business world. Think about it. It's a team sport. You have constraints like salary caps. You're always looking for top talent, the first-round draft picks.
Yep.
You're going head-to-head with competitors in an arena, which in our case is a conference room or a Zoom meeting. And ultimately, you keep score where wins and losses actually matter. So it's kind of a constant cycle of strategy, preparation, practice, and execution. And I'm completely addicted to every aspect of it. So it scratches my competitive itch. It definitely gives me the drive to build winning teams and to do something of significance. It's the closest thing I can get to my childhood dream, just a different arena.
We all have to pursue those dreams, right? And I think if you have this sense in your life where you're feeling more pulled than when you're pushing, that's what really makes people stand out. And we like to talk about brilliant people at work, right? What's interesting about your background is you had this shift where you stepped out at one point from the operator seat as a CRO and into the operating partner role that you're in today. What made that the right next move for you?
You know, becoming a PE operating partner wasn't something I planned. My career kind of took me from wasn't on the bingo card.
Never heard that one before, Paul.
I'm sure. My career took me from publicly traded companies into VC world and then into PE-backed firms. And for the last 15 years, I served as CRO, Chief Growth Officer for 5 different PE firms. Some of these experiences were incredible. And others, well, let's just say they were learning experiences.
Fail forward.
But the opportunity, this one was different. And there were several kind of factors that converged to make it my next best chapter. The first was the culture at Sixth Street. It was magnetic. There's an X factor here. There's a sense of shared purpose and energy. And it's one I've encountered a few times in my career, but you can feel it. There's something special happening. It's like capturing lightning in a bottle. Leadership embodies this, and it just permeates the entire firm. Second, it's a customer-centric mindset, and our customers are LPs and portco companies. So it fits my desire to be of service and solve problems for our customers. And that idea of delivering returns to our investors and helping our portco companies be more successful, it's the right place for me. And then third, there's a philosophical belief of earning the right to make an impact at our portco companies, which I feel the push strategy can backfire. It creates resistance, and sometimes in the portfolio company leadership, you feel like an intruder. So this approach is about building trust and rapport with the C-suite. It's about demonstrating values, about our expertise, and then hopefully they invite us in to help them solve their challenges and achieve their goals. It's about being a trust advisor, not an intruder. So I really think this pull strategy just resonates with me in so many ways. And then finally, it was a chance to actually accelerate my own growth and learning by working alongside the deal teams and participating in due diligence. I just couldn't pass up the opportunity to give it a chance.
It's amazing when you get to join a firm where the culture is so magnetic and, again, where you have had that shift from push to pull. I'm curious, what changed most in that transition from operator to operating partner? As you think about your operator days, what do you come back to and draw on constantly in the seat you are today?
Well, one of the biggest shifts for the first time in 30 years, I'm an individual contributor, which means my performance review cycles are a lot less complicated these days. Even though the roles change, I think certain aspects of being an operator are just kind of deeply ingrained. I'm naturally drawn to the team dynamic and the importance of accountability. If you want to be a CRO, you need to have those two traits. I love embracing the responsibility of carrying the revenue number. It was never lost on me. It was never a burden. And I understand that if my go-to-market teams don't deliver, it impacts the entire company. So the shared responsibility of purpose and something of value that is immensely impactful is critical. I truly kind of miss the thrill of being in the trenches with the team and building something from the ground up and getting your hands dirty and working up a sweat. And I especially miss the direct impact of building and mentoring teams. You know, witnessing their growth, seeing their performance soar, and feeling their commitment. It's something you can't get unless you're directly there. Although I'm in a different vantage point, I try to bring some of those same aspects to the work I do with the portco companies.
You touched on something that I actually haven't picked up on as much before there, which I think is specific to the go-to-market function that you're in, which is this moral compass of carrying the pressure and the burden of the revenue targets and the goals there, and somebody that really has the internal sense of, I own this, I'm accountable, and I will not let the team fail. How critical of a behavioral trait that is to that function specifically.
Well, for sure. I think it's a team sport, but the tip of the spear is the go-to-market commercial organization. So success and failure, even though hard work is across the company, really comes down to that point of having someone trust you and the ability to solve their problem and then deliver on that promise. So I don't take that lightly. I take that as something that is purpose-driven. And more importantly, it impacts mortgage payments and rent payments and careers and families. And I just don't lose sight of that. As an operating partner or as a CRO, I felt like that was my responsibility to do everything I can to help everyone in the company win.
You talk a lot about shifting from owning building teams and being directly in the trenches to today really just being that hand-in-hand or side-by-side partner to those teams. And you've shared with me before that even when you have control as a CRO, leadership still is about influence in those roles and very much so in this role. When you think about partnering with CEOs and CROs and other commercial leaders, how do you build that trust quickly, especially in an environment where the pressure to perform and to drive action is so high?
Even in a position of authority, it's perceived control. You really have to lead through influence and connecting with the people and get that trust. As an operator, I could always sense who was truly committed and who was just going through the motions. Your title may give you the illusion that you can control that, but you can't truly control people. Not if you want them to perform at their highest level over the long haul, not just a short sprint. So if someone wasn't bought into the vision or we weren't clear on why the company needed to go that direction for our customers or for them individually, I saw that as a reflection of my leadership. It was my responsibility to unlock that potential, to earn their trust, to inspire them to bring their best selves to the table, not for a short sprint, but for the long haul. And creating that shared vision, healthy sense of creative tension becomes even more critical under pressure. All those ideas and kind of philosophical beliefs is the same approach working in partnership with the portcos. It's my responsibility to earn the trust and to show that I'm here to help them on the same side of the table, not be on the opposite side table, giving them what to do. It's more of a collaboration on how to go do it and get that common purpose and the shared values and the connection and trust that you need in order to have high performance.
Really important point, and that sense of being in it together on the same side of the table. I've even had somebody tell me before, like they'll change how they dress to make sure they're perceived differently from their investment professionals that are on their team.
For sure.
Let's talk a bit about the Sixth Street platform, because Sixth Street does not look like most firms, and you've already touched on some elements of this, but it's incredibly flexible, thematic, and you're really known for offering creative, between-the-box solutions. In conjunction with that, you've evolved from mostly doing minority investing to now taking majority positions. And as a result of that, perhaps you've built this real internal operating muscle with like the MASH system and the Pentagon, like sourcing engine, all these little tools I've heard about. How has your model and those capabilities shifted over time, and how do you source diligence and create value as an operating team today?
That's a great question. Sixth Street is truly unique. Now, I'm totally biased.
Aren't we all, though?
Yes. It's built on what I'd call disciplined flexibility. As you mentioned, we have the ability to do investment strategies from minority to majority control. And we've really evolved the way our toolkit is tailored for this approach. So specific opportunities are maximized with value creation potential. What makes this all possible, to be honest, is the culture. It's very much a one-team approach. We combine that with deep cross-platform collaboration and domain expertise. We've also invested heavily to the tools you mentioned. Now, that's just enhancing our sourcing and engagement capabilities, and it allows us to kind of identify and connect with potential portfolio companies in a highly targeted and efficient way. But ultimately, it comes down to the combination of discipline, flexibility, the cross-platform collaboration, the cutting-edge technology certainly helps. And we source those deals, we do the due diligence, and we ultimately use those tools to create a value creation plan. So Sixth Street, it really has the ability with the culture and the tools to move quickly, decisively when we see an opportunity and a compelling investment. We bring the full weight of Sixth Street resources to bear. So it's pretty amazing to see how some of these decisions are made, but more importantly, how we surround the investment decision with the right resources across the firm, not just in growth equity.
When you think about those resources across the firm, is there one you could speak about or something as you think about that toolkit that's really distinct and specific to Sixth Street that you just think, if you're a CEO or founder, that resource is really making an even bigger difference for those people?
It's really interesting. I don't think, even though we have some proprietary tools, I don't think if we compared apples to apples with every other PE firm in the world, you would see us as different. I think the embodiment of the culture, the values, the philosophy, the agility, the real customer-centric approach, I think that's what takes those tools and makes you differentiated in the space. And I think CEOs struggle with this. You can have the world's best tech stack, but until you get the right people who are committed driving that execution with a culture that's customer-centric, you might be left with an expensive tech stack and not the results that you want. So I actually think it's more about the people than the philosophy than it is about the tech stack and the tools.
Is there anything you've done to systematize that culture shaping that you're talking about?
It starts with the leadership. I think the leadership embodies it every single day. Actions speak louder than words. So to see it in our meetings, in our weeklies, our cross-collaboration is a great example. We still meet as a company as an all hands. Everyone comes in weekly. And then once a year, we meet in Austin, Texas, physically. So it just kind of starts at the leadership, and everywhere in the firm, from partners to MDs to an associate, we seem to all have shared values and a common purpose, which again, LP-centric, helping our portcos win and returning capital back to the LPs.
Let's go a little bit further as we set the stage for the audience too around the Sixth Street model. You're part of a relatively new operating team. Can you walk us through the structure of that team? Who's around the table, and how do you all work together across the portfolio?
We're an operating team that's relatively new in formation, but incredibly deep in experience. Everyone on the growth equity operating team has over 25 years of hands-on operational experience. We're a group of about 15. It's a mix between full-time operating partners like myself and senior advisors. We have expertise across all C-suite functions. So think of it as product, finance, talent, go-to-market, customer experience, RevOps. And then we extend and scale with the use of kind of first-tier consulting firms and management firms. So to your point and question, one of the most pleasant surprises of the role is how we work together. It's been seamless and incredibly impactful. I think Sixth Street has a knack for hiring kind of low ego, high EQ, IQ individuals. But we've assembled a group of experts who really prioritize adding value, supporting the portco company, and not claiming credit and trying to get the light shined on us. So even though the team structure is around subject matter experts, we kind of operate as a cohesive unit, not in silos. Just like a high-performing C-suite, we understand that interdependence is key. A company can't win with a long run. We're a great, stellar go-to-market organization and a terrible product, or vice versa. So let me give you an example of how this kind of works in real life.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We were evaluating a potential investment where the value creation opportunity kind of hinged on a combination of new product roadmap and go-to-market execution. So essentially move up market with new products and features, shift their sales and marketing approach. The product lead, a senior advisor, and I worked in lockstep throughout the whole due diligence process. I sat on his product roadmap reviews and deep dives on technology. He joined me on the go-to-market sessions. This ensured that we had kind of a shared and deep understanding of the product roadmap, the required timelines, the corresponding changes we need in sales and marketing. All this to say, how could we capitalize on the opportunity by moving up market with new products? This is exactly how a high-performing C-suite operates. In fact, everyone on the operating team has held multiple C-suite roles in multiple companies with a track record of success. I often joke, it's just a joke, that this is the dream team I would assemble if I were a CEO.
And not a joke, because you've done it,
it's truly a great, it would be a wonderful C-suite.
It sure is. Now let's pivot more to the go-to-market transformation work that you do. One, I think we should talk about how deep you go in diligence. I know that you have this mindset around asking the questions that go not just one, but 3 levels down to actually get to the truth of a situation or what's going on or the data that will tell you where the opportunities for value creation are. So when it comes to commercial diligence, how do you first get invited to that process by the deal team? And also, what are the questions you always find yourself coming back to?
Yeah. I'm going to be a broken record here. So collaboration is so deeply ingrained in our DNA at Sixth Street. So it's actually seamless between the deal team and the operating team. We literally function as one unit. So from the start, our focus is gaining the most comprehensive understanding of the business, obviously, so we can assess the risk and opportunities of that company. This deep dive during due diligence means When the deal closes, the operating team has not only just a wealth of knowledge about the business, but hopefully through the interaction with the executive team, we've got a strong foundation of trust with the executive team. And my approach in commercial due diligence is a bit like a doctor examining a patient rather than a pharmacist simply filling out a prescription. I want to understand the health of the business, not just treat the symptoms. I truly examine all the vital signs, as you can imagine. That's unit economics. But then I want to dig deeper to understand the underlying drivers of those numbers, regardless if they're exceeding benchmarks or not. I'm a big believer that strong foundations, so I start to understand their ideal customer profile. What have they done in segmentation? I want to map out their buyer's journey. I want to identify the key players on the buying team. I want to understand their pricing and packaging strategy and when was the last time they evaluated it. I also want to examine the organizational design, the comp structures, the coverage models, the hiring process, the sales process, brand and demand gen strategies, basically the whole 9 yards, because I want to have that contextual understanding with the deal team so I can present with the deal team, here are our findings, here's where we think there are risks, here's where we think there are opportunities. And it's all data-driven with the exception of you want to truly understand what's the culture and what's the change management process and what kind of humans are we dealing with on the other side.
That's a really good framework. And then from there, what you've said is you're not really a fan of cookie cutter playbooks, but you walk in, you at least know the areas that you're going to really look at and dive deeper into. And that from there, every business needs its own path to performance. So at the point of acquisition, as you walk into a new company, where do you start at that point? And how do you not just assess the commercial engine in the ways you just talked about, but how do you build that bespoke plan, but still move at pace? Because I think that's the key bit.
Yeah, you're spot on. Not a fan of generic one-size-fits-all playbooks. However, I am a true believer in pattern recognition and contextual understanding. So every business, as you said, is unique and they're on a path to peak performance and everything should be tailored to assist them in that journey. So I think our model, as you heard before, the one team approach between operating partner and due diligence starts from day one. And the goal there is to earn the management's trust by demonstrating not that we can ask smart questions about numbers, but we generally care about learning about their business inside and out. That's a springboard. That's a springboard to allow us to see the process, the patterns start to emerge. And patterns on both sides of the coin. There are excellent things in companies you're like, wow, we want to amplify more of that. And there are areas of opportunity where, gosh, we have things that we can bring to bear to help them. But it's got to be data-driven and it's got to have a human touch. So data, for me, informs the right questions. So when you talk about how do we springboard, it's looking at the data, doing our homework, really understanding their business. And then I want to spark authentic business conversations. I don't want gotcha interrogations, but genuine dialogue. They're the ones that are in the trenches doing the work every single day. They understand their business. They know the nuances. They have the unfortunate history of how they got here. So to really scale effectively, you have to be skilled at both data analysis, the types of insightful conversations to unlock what's actually there. And again, I think this is really, really predicated on building trust and having a genuine understanding of their business to start from. There's no way for me to walk on day one and know the business as well as they do, but it's upon me to really be as if I'm a badged employee trying to understand the context. Then I can figure out what's the pace of change capable, what are the competing priorities, what's the optimal sequencing of initiatives we may want to do. And then you have to understand the people and make sure you have an abundance of trust. So you're right. I don't like playbooks. I prefer frameworks and guides that give us the flexibility, but a structure. And I certainly want all that to foster collaboration and trust over kind of some rigid cookie cutter solution that we assume we know the answer. Pattern recognition, incredibly important. Scaling, incredibly important. Authentic dialogue and trust, mission critical.
Paul, you've helped lead real go-to-market transformation in so many places, and not just quick wins, but actual change. You talked a lot about pattern recognition. Help us to see, for those of us in the audience who maybe are go-to-market operating partners or CROs or just other people that are thinking about this role, where do companies tend to get stuck, and what's something you've learned for sure about how to shift sales performance or accelerate sales performance? And is there a lesson, a piece of advice that you find yourself coming back to again and again as you advise management? Question.
I've seen the movie a couple times, and I totally understand the question. Ironically, one of the biggest stumbling blocks in go-to-market transformation is still silos. And those divides between marketing and sales, it sounds obvious, but it's shocking. It's still so common. So the first place I start is let's make sure that everyone on the commercial team is operating like a revenue team, not like separate countries with different languages and conflicting agendas. Let's break down those silos. Let's foster the collaboration between those two entities. And let's make sure we have a unified approach to the customer, to revenue. Another common place I start, these are all basic, but they are big unlocks, what we talked about before. I'm always blown away that we think we know what our ideal customer profile is, and we do, but to the level of being able to make it data-driven. How do we use that information for proper segmentation? I truly believe you cannot hit the target you can't see. So the more effort that you can really find to refine your ICP, have a data-driven version of that, perform advanced segmentation, you'll unlock some performance there, no doubt. I just think it's a waste of sales teams chasing every lead, regardless of fit. They're wasting valuable time. And as a sales professional, time is the resource you can't put back on the calendar. Once it's wasted, it's wasted. So ICP, targeted segmentation, really highly focused potential prospects who want to do business and need to do business. And then I've learned a few timeless lessons I'll keep coming back to, and I've gone back to these time and time again. I'd say the first one I've probably said 1,000 times is inputs to outputs. You can't necessarily control all the outcomes, but you can 100% control the effort, the preparation, the activities that drive results. So focus on the inputs, and the outputs will always follow at some point. The second one we've talked about many times, I am just a firm believer that trust is the currency of any successful team. You have to have an abundance of trust. That's built through transparency, open communication. It's consistent follow-through. It's consistency in how you show up. So I think you have to have an abundance of trust if you want to have a high-performance team. The third thing I always fall back on is discipline equals freedom. Sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. Establishing clear processes, consistent routines, a disciplined approach, this creates the foundation for creativity and innovation, not the other way around. So discipline is absolutely equal to freedom. And finally, this is my own little take on culture. What you create, promote, or allow over time will define your culture. So if you're not intentional about the culture you're creating at every level of the organization, not just the boardroom where you have shared values and a vision, but literally how you show up for our prospects, how you prep for a meeting, how you execute your job, that will become your culture over time. So never underestimate the power of consistency. The small, consistent actions repeated over and over will yield extraordinary results. And then I often say, one I borrowed from the founder of Leadville 100 MTB, which is Ken Chobler, you better than you think you are, and you can do more than you think you can.
One, I think we could probably do an entire podcast just on ideal customer profiles.
We could, for sure. I could, for sure.
Yeah, Then I think the key there is start with the customer segmentation, but more importantly, spend time really speaking directly to customers, getting not just who they are, but who are they really as humans, because that's what gets you. I mean, buyers are emotional buyers, right? So get to that part of it and reflect that on your ICPs as you distill them and get them down is some of what I'm picking up on.
And it's dynamic.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we become rigid once we understand our current ICP. Your product evolves, your competition evolves, the theaters in which you play in evolve, the needs of your prospects change. I think it's incredibly important to understand your current ICP and have a system in place where you can see data that might change your opinion or a need for refinement of that ICP. That's why I think it's one of those building blocks you just go back to time and time again.
Exactly. It does need refreshment. Obviously, you don't want to refresh it too often so that your sales team is just hit with something new all the time, right? But do you have a cadence for that? Is it every 6 months? Great
question. So I feel if you are a data-driven with humanity organization, your natural KPI operating cadence should give you the flexibility to see it. Where will you see it? You'll see it in win rates. You'll see it in closed loss reasons. You'll see it in new competitors in the market. You'll see it in some sort of pricing discount change, not a trend that you didn't see before. So it's less about student body right, student body left, change because you think you need to change. It's more about that discipline equals freedom of how are we looking at the data on a regular basis to ask the right questions, to facilitate the authentic conversations, to make an informed, intentional decision, not just assume we got it right and move on for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. And then I love that framework about discipline equals freedom. That's certainly been the case even in my life personally as well as professionally. Creates that clarity that a process can really move forward quickly because everybody knows what the next step is, and you don't have to ask and get slowed down as a result of that. Let's pivot from here to hiring CRO and commercial talent, because obviously partnering with those people is a big part of your job. But at times there's need to upskill or upgrade talent completely. So let's talk about the head of sales role. One, it's one of the highest turnover roles in private equity, let alone business in general. There's high expectations, there's short runways, and there's real pressure. Again, like the numbers are so obvious. So why do you think the role is so tough, and what separates the really good CROs who actually thrive, in your view?
The CRO seat. It's the hot seat, the ejector seat, the musical chairs of SaaS, as I like to say. I think the average tenure is 1.4 years or less for a CRO at this point. I think it changes, but I think in comparison, a COO lasts somewhere between 3 and 4 years. So it's a great question. Why a revolving door? And I think about it a little bit different. If you think about the CRO role or Chief Growth Officer role, those roles didn't exist before 2010. It was really when SaaS took off where we kind of changed the mindset from perpetual license or recurring subscriptions to recurring subscriptions, kind of on-prem to cloud. It was a seismic shift. And kind of the old way of sales or VP of sales, it was focused on hitting quotas and executing someone else's strategy. CRO, totally different. They're responsible for the entire revenue engine, sales, marketing, customer success, the whole shebang. They're not executing, they're building the go-to-market strategy. And they're obsessed with customer lifetime value and CAC, not just bookings numbers. It's a whole different ballgame. And imagine the deep expertise you need in customer insights. You need to understand marketing. You have to have sales execution, financial acumen. You have to be a strategist. You have to be a field journal. You literally have to have all these things roll into one. You're an executor, you're a customer whisperer, you're a financial guru, and you're navigating kind of these demands that I call our microwave popcorn world. We all want popcorn made in 1 minute and 28 seconds, but we've forgotten what it takes to grow corn. So the CRO role, it's high stakes, it's high pressure, it's high turnover. And I say, welcome to the major leagues. This is what we signed up for, but the expectations are higher and the role is far more complex than just trying to hit quota or executing someone else's strategy.
As you think about all of those different capabilities and skill sets, and you work with CEOs or boards to evaluate the talent of these portfolio companies that you walk into, what's on your scorecard for a commercial leader, and specifically the CRO or Chief Growth Officer?
Obviously, strategic leadership and vision. As we just talked about, it's not about taking someone else's go-to-market strategy. You're responsible for not only seeing what the strategy needs to be today, but what it needs to be tomorrow. You have to look around those corners. So you have to have a strategy and you have to have a compelling one. It has to be aligned to the company overall goals. And those goals are different. So a CRO who's a product-led expert going into a traditional SaaS enterprise solution, those are different horses. So pick the right horse for that. They need to have a deep understanding of kind of the market, the competition, where the industry is heading. And of course, you have to have all the buzzwords, but more importantly, you have to show me the numbers. Show me how you've taken a strategic idea and moved it into execution, which is the next thing I care about. Show me how you execute. Show me operational excellence. This is really where the rubber meets the road. A proven track record, exceeding revenue targets, managing your unit economics. Show me how you've grown year over year by not just throwing bodies and dollars at it, but being efficient and effective and understanding the inputs to outputs. Then can they build and motivate high-performing sales teams? How do they coach their frontline leaders? What's their performance management style? Do they actually have an operating cadence where it's in the details and the KPIs and data-driven? How accurate are they at forecasting? It sounds like that should be table stakes, but I'm blown away on how hard it seems to be predictive. And my bar is you should be plus or minus 5%. So got to have sales acumen. You got to have the execution. We talked about this one. I think it's super important. The collaboration and communication, you have to have those. You can't operate as a true CRO in a silo. You have to work seamlessly between marketing and product and customer success, the entire ecosystem. So strong cross-functional relationships are a must. And of course, the communication skills are critical. You can't articulate a complex idea that no one understands, then you've got a problem. So you've got to be able to do both written and verbal communication at the highest level and manage those relationships and the board, the investors, the customers. That's all part of collaboration. And then finally, you have to have a culture fit. The values have to be shared. It's one of those ones that if you have a great candidate, I always double click to make sure the body doesn't reject the organ. If you don't have the same culture or the same shared values, chances are, even if the person is an excellent executor, a great strategic thinker, a collaborator, a communicator, long-term success is probably at risk. So there are no shortcuts to greatness. You have to have the fundamentals and you have to be on your game.
Really, there aren't? I would love some, Paul. The things you described really were all about doing the fundamentals, or like you say, the basics better, prioritizing, getting data-driven, communicating, creating the atmosphere for great teamwork. You've also talked a lot about your role is not only to help these teams do the basics better, but also do artificial intelligence faster. And today, most companies are probably only using a fraction of their commercial tech stack. And often, I think, complexity gets in the way of performance. And so when you think about helping a team simplify, focus, and drive ROI from their tech stack, where do you start there to get tech and AI faster?
So the right question you asked is, where do you begin to untangle this mess? And I go back to the basics. So first, simple, how about we just check those license and usage rates for your current tech stack? You'd be surprised how much money you can find hiding in the sofa cushions from subscriptions you're not even utilizing just from a license perspective. People aren't even logging on. For me, I really push, and when I was a CRO, this was something I did on a quarterly basis, is go through every piece of tech. Tell me, what problem are we trying to solve? What is its purpose? How are we measuring that success? And tie it to some sort of KPI. Like, it should enable something from that. And obviously, reduce the redundancies you have in that tech stack. So do we need 3 social media platforms? No. And you'll see here kind of a theme in my thinking, which is a bad process with a tech stack just becomes a really expensive bad process. So if you got the right tools, make sure they're actually being used effectively, but start with really understanding, what is the process that I need? How do I make sure the process is right? Train your teams, optimize the workflows, ensure tech amplifies your efforts, not hinders them. And finally, I would say create an oversight and review tech stack every single quarter. It's so much easier today to throw quote unquote tech at the problem versus really saying, is this a people problem? Is this a process problem? Is this something I can do in my own control that doesn't actually need tech? And as you say, it is incredibly complicated when you throw AI on that, because that 10,000 number just went through the roof like 20,000, 50,000. So it's incredibly hard.
It's very clear that you're spending real time helping companies not only navigate technology and how it supports them, but now specifically AI, and not just as a buzzword, but in ways that actually support growth and move people and processes along to actual revenue generation. What's your take on where AI is adding the most value on the go-to-market function right now?
I don't think we're past the hype yet. Honestly, I still think we're in the frothy phase, but we're encouraging our portco companies to kind of dive in, experiment, and kick the tires. And what we've tried to do from the operating team perspective is take a subset of our portcos, We're asking them to launch at least one AI project between now and the end of the year where we can track the progress, we can measure the impact by year end, and let's do it as a learn by doing exercise, not a here's a prescription. And it's not smooth sailing. There are three big hurdles that come up. One, the noise. We just talked about it. The go-to-market tech stack bursting at the seams before AI. Now it's an explosion. So even more overwhelming trying to figure out what's the right solution to solve this problem. The second is there's a point solution. There must be 10 for every little micro piece of the process. We don't need 10. We need maybe one or two. And the third is just the readiness of the people. Do we have the people in place? And do we have the data for the people to actually implement AI and leverage AI? So where we're seeing some real promise in the go-to-market, specifically go-to-market, I think engineering and support is a different, is we're focusing kind of on three big questions. Can it boost efficiency and save time? I think we have some real use cases that say yes to that. Can it drive tangible revenue growth? That's obviously what we're in the game for, is to drive the top line and do it efficiently with our unit economics. And then finally, do we have a strong ROI? Do we get a bang for our buck? We don't want to do this change management process and not actually move the needle from a positive ROI perspective. So we're seeing some traction in sales and marketing. Think of it this way. There are sales assistants for AEs and SDRs. That's taking care of a lot of the time-consuming, what I would call grunt work. Hopefully freeing up your reps to prep and practice, to do better work at their profession versus some of the tedious admin work. I think, honestly, AI-driven deal forecasting and risk assessment of deals, I'm blown away on how accurate some of the solutions today can be. And again, more importantly, it's AI assisted in understanding where you might have a people or a process challenge and be proactive on helping your team actually perform at a higher level. I think the unlock on coaching and call scoring, helping reps actually listen to their own calls, do dress rehearsals with their own calls, especially for enterprise selling. I found it incredibly hard when we moved from the world of we used to plug in our phones next to our reps and listen to their sales call to actually having sales call recording technology. Just getting a chance to listen to a numerous number of calls from reps is incredibly hard. So why not use AI-powered coaching to do that work for us? And more importantly, do it on 100% of the calls, not just one, not just two, but 100% of the calls. And this one seems like table stakes, but conversational AI, aka record your conversations, I think this is the oil for the future AI. So how do we take where the customer is having challenges understanding our solution, or what is the decision criteria that the customer is going through to pick our solution, feeding that back into our ICP indexing, our advanced segmentation, our content creation. So starting just with a company saying, if you're not recording your phone calls, start recording your phone calls. So those are just a few examples. And we're trying to move beyond the hype and deliver value, but the value has to be real. We don't want the future states project. We want the project today. And hopefully through that, you reduce your tech stack, not expand your tech stack.
Let me pick up on creating that foundation. So recording or at least transcribing all of your calls. Because from there, whether the technology exists already today or there's something down the line, at least you've captured the data over which you can run AI and all sorts of analytics and really interesting tools and vendors. Second, most people are in this experimenting, finding use cases and trying to figure out, multiple applications of this tool. And it sounds like that's where you guys are also at Sixth Street. But that's mostly what I'm hearing from the market in terms of level of maturity of these things across portfolios. And starting to reveal, right, like you said, where is the efficiencies versus the actual ROI and those sorts of things. And then I think there's multiple areas to address and look at. I like that piece that you talked about removing the grunt work, because I think let's get humans to do the job that they can uniquely do. And in sales, right, we're talking about building human relationships that move the needle. And so how can you layer in AI over that to take out anything that we would be glad to give away to an assistant anyway?
You're spot on. And think about the power of the tool today. If you really buy in, and I'm talking kind of enterprise sales for a second, there's a little different motion for high volume, high velocity. But if you think about a high dollar item, a big pain point for a prospect, my go-to is prep and practice. We should know everything about our prospect. We should know everything about the buying team. We should know what's in it for them, the micro whiffy. We should drive our knowledge as deep as we possibly can and have an authentic business conversation on how we can help solve that problem. That is incredibly time consuming, incredibly time. And then throw in, oh, by the way, I want you to dress rehearsal this, and I want you to practice, and I want to make sure you've got the objections, and I want a call plan, and I want all these things. You can literally do that for 100% of the calls today. All of that ongoing knowledge of the company, the persona-based work, all of that can be done in minutes or seconds versus days and weeks. So I don't think we have to be striving for this be-all, end-all AI. I think we can really just say, what is the power of the tool today in our hands? It doesn't need to be trained per se. It just needs to be activated at the rep level, at the leadership level, and really move the needle in some profound ways that we haven't thought, going back to the basics, just going back in a very informed way.
I want to come back to another statement I've heard you say before, which is if you're not putting your hands on the keyboard every day, or maybe now with voice, keyboard isn't the phrase, but you're becoming irrelevant. So how do you stay close to the work and to what's next now that you're not, in the operator seat specifically? And how do you help your leaders do the same?
Yeah, and let me unpack that one a little bit. So, as a CRO, you can't be in the trenches doing everything. And we've seen CROs fail who were great individual contributors who could get a deal done, but failed to try to scale that across the team. But what I really mean is, I think it's incredibly important to have this direct engagement in gathering ground truth. So it's about going beyond the reports and dashboards and asking the why questions relentlessly. And that means questions throughout the organization. I don't want just an executive view. I want the frontline leaders. I want it in the hallways. I want it by the coffee machine. I want it in skip level one-on-ones. I want it with the frontline employees. Those that are closest to the customer often have the most valuable and unfiltered insights. The listening for those friction points and where the processes are clunky and the tools are falling short and the opportunities that the individual sees. What are some of the customers asking for we're not providing? So these conversations, these moments of active listening are gold mines. So it's about making sure you don't lose sight just by looking at a dashboard, but really having those active listening sessions and finding those insights inside your organization so you don't become irrelevant, your strategy doesn't become irrelevant, and you have the details of the execution. So you're not just prescribing, you're actually doing the work. So I look for ways to uncover that hidden friction, those opportunities, those whispers of insight that you thought were throwaway comments to become ultimately a revenue generation. So it's really about a continuous commitment to staying relevant, ahead of the curve, but it's really about curiosity. It's a genuine desire to understand the business from every angle. And I think a CR has to do that. They have to be at the highest level, looking around the corners, but need to validate that through what's actually happening on the ground front, what's happening with your prospects.
Surprise, surprise. It always comes back to listening, huh? Building on all of that, Paul, where do you think go-to-market is headed next?
Well, we talked about one of them earlier. I think if you have silos between your teams that basically facilitate the lifetime value of your customer, you're dead. I think you have to have this fully integrated, fully customer-centric, fully unified approach. I think AI will require that. I think those silos will have to be completely eliminated if you want to be successful in the next tier. Some of the things I'm also seeing is, again, stuff we've talked about forever. Personalization is no longer nice to have. I think AI has created even more noise and kind of more doubt in the marketing message. So how do we have these personalized messages that connect and then facilitate authentic conversations? I'm hearing a trend lately, which it kind of blows my mind. And I can't tell if it's post-COVID, but events are back and events are driving true demand and opportunities to go to close one. I used to write off events as an awareness. I didn't write them as a demand generation tool. So I think this is a great example of the information is so noisy that people are thirsty for the human experience to really understand and have an authentic conversation. So I think go-to-market organizations are going to have to figure out, how do we scale digitally, but how do we scale in the human-to-human connection point? So I think that's an important one, which gets me to community. I think it's important that we figure out how to actually have brands that foster loyalty and organic growth through community. So that's bringing the offline, it's bringing the online, it's allowing customers to connect to each other and sharing their best practices. And that's a scary thing for a lot of companies when they think about, oh my gosh, my net promoter score for that customer, I wouldn't want them to talk to that customer. But in reality, they're dealing with a lot of the same issues with what challenges they're trying to solve. So I think you have to create those spaces and allow customers to actually have a community for themselves. And then finally, I think there's this blurring line between product-led growth and traditional SaaS or software. So this is going to require kind of a shift in commercial leaders focusing on, how do I make my product so intuitive to use? How can I literally make onboarding self-onboarding? So that's making sales and marketing play a completely different role when you think about, how do I deliver product value nurturing statements? How do I provide an intuitive product that's easy to set up and go on my own? And then you're going to have to continue to be incredibly astute at data-driven execution. So really taking volumes of data and finding the signal inside of that and ignoring the noise, and then validating that with the one-on-one skip levels and the frontline leaders. It's going to be an interesting 10 to 20 years.
Let's go back to where we started almost a bit in this conversation, which was your goals growing up and becoming an athlete. But today you've described yourself as a bit of a corporate athlete. I know that's not just a metaphor, but how does that mindset actually show up in how you lead and perform?
Yeah, it's not a catchphrase for me. It's kind of a way of life, and it forms how I lead and hopefully how I perform and how I approach challenges. So for me, embracing a growth mindset is step one. I try to get a valuable lesson from every experience, whether that was a success or failure. And learning then becomes continuous, and it's a process, and there's always room for improvement. So it's a fine line between celebrating your micro wins, but never saying I'm there. I think I'm a work in progress and will be forever. So growth mindset is number one for me. Second, it's about really daily progress. And small incremental gains, it's just like a compounding over time. It just can lead to significant results. The problem is most of us are not consistent in that kind of pursuit. So I'm always looking for, can I be consistent to push myself to be a little bit better in some aspect every single day? And then hopefully from 5 years or 10 years, I see some real progress. And then I think we lose sight of sometimes about building capacity. And what I mean by capacity is it's both mental and physical. So the stress of life is hard. I think having huge capacity for physical demands facilitates the capacity for the mental capabilities, how to stay focused, how to sustain that performance when things are really hard. So I'm always looking for ways to build capacity. And then ultimately, if you haven't heard this theme from my conversation, to me, it comes down to practice, feedback, more practice. It's just a constant kind of improvement, refining my skills, trying to get better every single day. And if you look at a professional ballerina, a chef, a professional football player, it is the same playbook. They literally look at, how do I run a pattern that's a fraction better? A Formula One driver is 1/100th of a second they're trying to squeeze out of some of these things. So it's really about optimizing my performance and being able to carry that over a long haul.
Practice makes perfect. Maybe not perfect, but it makes better.
Perfect practice makes perfect.
You talked a little bit about some of your interests, and I'm really curious about, what are some of those non-negotiables in your daily routines and habits, whether it's physical, mental, professional, that help you stay sharp and on your game, Paul?
So eating healthy, it seems super easy, straightforward. Good food in, great things happen. So I've really tried to, over the years, get more educated on what great nutrition looks like. Even like being clear on what constitutes great nutrition, macros versus micros. So big fan of that. The one I think I've moved up on my priority list, probably number one, is sleep. I've gone deep on the science. I'm sure you have as well. It is probably the biggest health hack we could do, which is to get good, consistent sleep, both REM and deep. So I'm literally tracking that every night. I'm doing things to make sure I'm in a routine. It's one of those constant improvement things where I want to get better and better sleep every single day. I exercise 6 days a week, no excuses, no misses. And then I match that with meditation. I've fallen deeply in love into the hot sauna routine. The benefits of the hot sauna are off the charts, and that's both an opportunity for silence and certainly for some suffering. And then I don't miss family time, wife time, and friend time. Like having the connection to community, as we talked about from a marketing perspective, I think it just kind of enriches your life, and that's a routine. I try to read a book a month. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. And then I try to make sure I recover. So it's easy to get stressed out, and it's super hard to remember to take a break and then recover and then surge, recover, surge. So recovery is a big part of everything I do.
It doesn't get more complicated actually than food, sleep, movement, friends and family. And those have been so key even for myself personal. And I've been curious about lots of those different things in various points of my life. And I haven't had a drink for 10 years, and I always laugh and joke with people, but I'm actually serious when I say this. 1/3 of a hangover is literally just being tired.
Yeah.
If I'm out late and I don't get sleep, I'm grumpy the next day. I don't feel like myself. So 100% in on sleep is everything. And it's funny, I think there's studies out there too around the amount of people in the world who actually can live off of 5 to 6 hours of sleep is it's like something like 5% of the population or 10% of the population. Like it's minimal. We all think we can. Most of us need 7 to 8, right around that age.
Can you live? Yes. Are you high performing? No.
Yes, exactly. That's it. What about any leaders that have been inspiring you lately? Are there people you've been paying attention to?
There's a couple that come to mind in the business world. I think what Google's going through, Sundar is navigating some really interesting times, not only from a legal perspective, but just AI and what's that mean for the core of their business model. But even some of the bets that they made 10 years ago that everyone laughed at, the driverless car is here. I'm watching him very closely to see how he navigates that. Jamie Dimon, I think, is very interesting, again, for a different set of complexity that he's dealing with in trying to navigate this really interesting world. So I think anybody who's really faced with a lot of complex challenges, who's really looking at how they drive innovation or build incredibly successful organizations over a long haul, I like to pay attention to. The second group is, and I don't mean this in jest, the Sixth Street leadership team. I watch them. They have real character. They have real integrity. They have real grit and drive. And I'm learning by watching how they show up in this world every single day. So that's a great opportunity for me to be inspired by leaders. And then this has been a beautiful gift on this side of the table as an operating partner. Our CEOs of our Portco companies, it's a great sandbox to see so many talented leaders navigate incredibly hard things on the front lines as they build a business and face unique challenges every single day. It would be a miss on my part if I didn't get the inspiration that our Portco CEOs deliver every single day. So those are kind of three that are top of mind for me from the business world, from internally and then externally.
I'm always amazed by how many incredible people there are out in the world that, in just this ability, you can learn from anyone, really. Up, down, sideways. I mean, we'll have to have one of your leaders on at some point, clearly, to talk about culture shaping and the magic that you've built at Sixth Street. What about any books, podcasts, ideas, other content that's shaping your thinking?
I have a couple addictions, books and podcasts, maybe two. I'm actually reading Noise. It's an old book, but it's behavioral economics, which I find super, super interesting, especially today. One I've probably read 10 times, and I tell everyone to read it, is Stephen Pressfield, Do the Work. Super short book, change your life. Ray Dalio, How Countries Go Broke, a sobering view of what we're dealing with. And one I'll probably surprise you is Rick Rubin, The Creative Way of Being.
Oh, I haven't read that one yet. Paul, we've done it. We are at the end of the episode, and how we like to wrap up is by defining brilliance in a few ways. I'm going to hit you with a quick lightning round. If you could please fill in the blanks for me. Purpose is.
Purpose is unstoppable.
Leadership is.
Leadership is more important than ever.
Success is.
Success is reaching your own full potential and helping others.
Brilliant leaders are.
Brilliant leaders are delivering results.
I perform at my best when.
I perform at my best when I'm on purpose.
Paul, this was such a rich conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
I loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Paul Dodd of 6th Street for joining us today. I hope all of you walk away inspired to grow by doing the basics better and AI faster. And thanks to you, our listeners, for tuning in. That's it for this episode of the Brilliant People podcast. I'm Linnea Jungnelius. If you found this conversation valuable, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show. And follow Assertitude on LinkedIn for the latest insights on how to lead and perform at your best. Until next time, stay brilliant at work and scale your knowledge.